The gunshot echoed through the parking garage like a thunderclap in a tomb. Sarah Mitchell's body crumpled against the concrete pillar, her white blouse blooming crimson as she slid downward, leaving a dark smear on the gray surface. Her phone clattered across the oil-stained floor, its cracked screen still glowing with the last message she'd ever send, *, Mom, I need help. He knows. *. Marcus Whitfield stood 15 feet away, his arms still extended, the pistol trembling in his grip. His wedding tuxedo, tailored, pressed, waiting in his apartment for a ceremony that would never happen, seemed like a costume from another life now. His eyes were hollow, unseeing, fixed on the woman he'd planned to marry just hours ago. She'd discovered something. One thing. One terrible, unforgivable thing that had unraveled 6 years of carefully constructed lies in a single afternoon. And now she was dying on the cold floor of a parking garage, 2 hours after she'd called off their wedding, her breath coming in shallow, desperate gasps as sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah Ann Mitchell ** was born on March 14, 1992, in Charleston, South Carolina, to parents who believed in fairness, hard work, and the fundamental goodness of people. Her father, James, was a high school history teacher who taught his daughter that truth always surfaces, no matter how deeply it's buried. Her mother, Catherine, was a pediatric nurse who showed her that compassion could coexist with strength. Sarah grew up believing the world made sense, that good people were rewarded and bad people faced consequences. She excelled in school, graduated summa cum laude from the College of Charleston with a degree in social work, and dedicated her life to helping trauma survivors rebuild their shattered worlds. She worked at the Lowcountry Crisis Center, where she counseled women escaping domestic violence, sexual assault survivors, and children removed from abusive homes. Her core wound ran deeper than anyone knew. At 16, she'd watched her best friend Emily endure a brutal assault and then suffer through a trial where the perpetrator walked free on a technicality. That moment had crystallized Sarah's worldview. Justice wasn't guaranteed, but fighting for it was non-negotiable. She carried that conviction into every relationship, every friendship, every moment of her life. Marcus James Whitfield ** was born on November 22, 1989, in Detroit, Michigan, though he rarely spoke about his childhood. His father had abandoned the family when Marcus was 7, his mother, Angela, worked 3 jobs to keep them housed and fed. Marcus learned early that survival required masks, you showed people what they wanted to see, and you protected yourself at all costs. He was brilliant, charming, and calculating. A full scholarship took him to the University of Michigan, where he studied criminal justice with a minor in psychology. He understood people, how they thought, what they feared, what they desired. After graduation, he joined the Charleston Police Department, rising quickly through the ranks. By 33, he was a detective with an impressive case clearance rate and a reputation for getting confessions from even the most hardened criminals. Marcus had his own wound, a desperate need for control born from years of childhood chaos. He needed to know everything, manage everything, predict everything. Uncertainty was unbearable. Love, to Marcus, wasn't trust, it was information. It was leverage. It was power. They met in February 2020, when Sarah came to the precinct to advocate for one of her clients. Marcus was immediately drawn to her, her passion, her conviction, her refusal to back down when she believed she was right. She saw in him a protector, someone who used his power to help the vulnerable. For 6 years, they built a life together, planning a future that seemed inevitable. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday, May 17, 2025, at the historic Magnolia Plantation. 200 guests. A string quartet. Sarah's dress had cost $3,000, a splurge she justified because this was supposed to be forever. But on Friday morning, May 16, 2025, Sarah made a discovery that shattered the foundation of everything she believed about the man she loved. Charleston in spring was a postcard, azaleas blooming in riotous pinks and purples, the air thick with salt and sweetness, tourists crowding King Street with their cameras and wonder. But beneath the beauty lived darker currents, stories the city preferred not to tell. Sarah and Marcus's relationship had always existed in two worlds. In public, they were the golden couple, the compassionate social worker and the dedicated detective, both fighting for justice in their own ways. At dinner parties, friends marveled at how perfectly they complemented each other. Sarah's parents adored Marcus, charmed by his respectful manners and his obvious devotion to their daughter. In private, the dynamics were more complicated. Marcus had keys to Sarah's apartment within 3 months of dating. He'd installed a security system, for her safety, that he monitored from his phone. He always knew where she was, who she was with, when she'd be home. Sarah had initially found it endearing. He cared so much, worried so much about her well-being in a city where her work put her in contact with dangerous people. But over time, the monitoring intensified. He questioned her about male colleagues. He accidentally read her text messages. He suggested she limit contact with certain friends who didn't understand their relationship. Sarah, trained to recognize these patterns in her clients, somehow rationalized them in her own life. Marcus wasn't controlling, he was protective. He wasn't jealous, he was invested. The cognitive dissonance created constant low-level anxiety she couldn't quite name. Marcus's colleagues at the precinct saw him differently than Sarah did. He was ruthlessly effective but cold, capable of psychological manipulation that bordered on cruel. During interrogations, he could make suspects believe he was their only friend, then turn on them with devastating precision. He won confessions through exhaustion, confusion, and fear. His lieutenant, a 20-year veteran named Rodriguez, had once pulled him aside after a particularly brutal interrogation. "You got the confession, Whitfield, but watch yourself. There's a line between effective and sadistic." Marcus had smiled, that charming, disarming smile that made people second-guess their concerns. "I'm just doing my job, sir. Getting dangerous people off the streets." Sarah's work at the crisis center brought her into frequent contact with the criminal justice system, which was how their paths kept crossing professionally. She'd advocated for victims in cases Marcus investigated, usually maintaining careful professional boundaries. But 6 months before the wedding, Sarah took on a new client, a 19-year-old woman named Jessica Reeves who'd reported being sexually assaulted by an acquaintance after a college party. The case was assigned to Marcus. Sarah couldn't be Jessica's official advocate due to the conflict of interest, but she'd met her during intake and had been struck by her raw terror, her desperate need to be believed. Sarah passed the case to her colleague, but she followed it closely, asking Marcus about its progress. Marcus said the investigation was ongoing. He said Jessica's story had inconsistencies. He said these cases were always complicated, that sometimes victims misremember details under trauma. The case sat in limbo for months, and Jessica's mental health deteriorated. She stopped attending classes. She stopped sleeping. She called the crisis center in despair, asking why nothing was happening, why no one believed her. Then, on May 15, 2025, one day before Sarah discovered the truth, Jessica Reeves took her own life in her dorm room, leaving a note that simply said, "I told the truth. It didn't matter." The call came to the crisis center at 6:47 a.m. on May 15. Sarah had been reviewing final details for the wedding, seating charts, vendor confirmations, the toast her maid of honor would give. When her director, Margaret, appeared in her doorway with tears in her eyes, Sarah knew immediately something terrible had happened. "Jessica Reeves died last night," Margaret said quietly. "Suicide. Her roommate found her this morning." The world tilted. Sarah gripped her desk, the wood grain swimming beneath her fingers. Jessica, bright, broken Jessica, who'd come to them believing the system would help her, that justice existed for people like her. What happened with her case? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. Why wasn't it moving forward? Margaret shook her head. "I don't know." Detective Whitfield said the evidence was inconclusive. Sarah's stomach clenched. Marcus had told her the same thing, but suddenly the explanation felt hollow, incomplete. She'd worked enough cases to know that inconclusive often meant someone hadn't looked hard enough, hadn't cared enough. She left work early, telling Margaret she needed to handle wedding preparations. Instead, she drove to the precinct, her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, a terrible question forming in her mind that she couldn't quite articulate yet. At the precinct, she found Marcus's lieutenant, Rodriguez. "I need to know about the Jessica Reeves case," she said. "Why it stalled?" Rodriguez's expression shifted, something between pity and discomfort. "Sarah, you know I can't discuss ongoing investigations with you." "It's not ongoing anymore," she said flatly. "The victim is dead." A long pause. Rodriguez glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Look, there were complications with that case. Evidence handling issues. Witness statements that didn't get properly documented. I had concerns, but Marcus insisted everything was by the book." "What kind of evidence handling issues?" "I can't say more. But if I were you, I'd ask your fiancé directly." Sarah left the precinct with her heart hammering. She'd spent 6 years with Marcus, had never questioned his integrity, his commitment to justice. But doubt, once planted, grew like poison. That evening, Marcus came home to her apartment, where they'd planned to spend their last night before the wedding apart, tradition, Sarah's mother had insisted. He was in good spirits, joking about cold feet, asking if she'd finished packing for their honeymoon in Santorini. Sarah watched him move through her kitchen, pouring wine, humming something tuneless. He seemed so normal, so familiar. But she saw him differently now, as if a filter had been removed. "How's the Reeves case going?" she asked casually. His hand stilled on the wine bottle for just a fraction of a second, so brief she almost missed it. "It's closed," he said. "The girl killed herself. Tragic, but not unexpected with her psychological history." "What psychological history?" "She had depression, anxiety. History of attention-seeking behavior. It's all documented." Sarah's training kicked in. She knew how victims were discredited, their mental health weaponized against them. "I met her, Marcus. She didn't seem attention-seeking. She seemed terrified." "You met her for what, 30 minutes during intake?" Marcus's tone shifted slightly, cooler. "I investigated for months. Trust me, the case wasn't strong." The word trust landed like a stone between them. "Can I see the file?" Sarah asked. "No. It's confidential police records. You know that. I have clearance for some case files through the Advocacy Center. Not this one." Marcus's smile was tight now, his charm crystallizing into something harder. "Sarah, it's our wedding weekend. Let's not do this." But she couldn't stop. The question had rooted itself too deeply. "Did you deliberately stall that investigation?" The air between them went arctic. Marcus set down his wine glass with exaggerated care. "Excuse me." Rodriguez said there were evidence handling issues. Problems with documentation. "Rodriguez is covering his own ass because his department has resource problems," Marcus snapped. "I did everything I could with that case. It wasn't viable. That's not my fault. A 19-year-old girl is dead, Marcus. And that's tragic. But it's not my responsibility to manufacture evidence for a case that wasn't there." They stared at each other across a gulf that had opened in seconds, revealing depths Sarah had never seen before. Marcus's expression, cold, defensive, utterly lacking empathy, frightened her in a way she couldn't name. "I think you should leave," she said quietly. "Sarah. Please. I need to think." He left, and the apartment felt larger, colder in his absence. Sarah sat on her couch, staring at her wedding dress hanging on the closet door, and wondered who she'd been about to marry. Sarah didn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she sat at her laptop, staring at the cursor blinking in the search bar. She knew accessing police databases without authorization was illegal, knew it could cost her job, her credibility. But Jessica's face haunted her, the hope in her eyes during that first meeting, the desperate belief that someone would help her. She had a login to the Advocacy Center's limited access portal, which allowed her to view certain case files for her clients. She typed in Jessica Reeves's name, her hands shaking. The file was thin, too thin for months of investigation. Sarah scanned through witness statements, evidence logs, interview transcripts. And then she found it, a discrepancy so glaring she wondered how she'd missed it before. The rape kit had been collected at the hospital the night of Jessica's assault. But according to the evidence log, it had been signed out by Marcus 3 weeks later and never logged back in. When Sarah cross-referenced with the lab reports, there was nothing, no DNA analysis, no processing, nothing. The rape kit had vanished. Sarah's vision blurred. She kept reading, each new detail another hammer blow. The suspect in Jessica's case, Blake Hoffman, a fraternity member from a wealthy Charleston family, had been interviewed once, briefly, and never called back. His father was a prominent attorney who donated to the Police Benevolent Fund. His cousin was a city councilman. There were text messages in the file, subpoenaed from Jessica's phone, showing Blake's aggressive pursuit, her clear rejections, his angry responses. Strong evidence that should have supported her claim. But in Marcus's report, these texts were dismissed as contextually ambiguous. And then Sarah found the worst part, a memo Marcus had written recommending the case be closed due to lack of credible evidence and witness reliability issues. The memo was dated 2 days after Blake Hoffman's father had made a $10,000 donation to a police charity event that Marcus had organized. The pieces assembled themselves into a picture so devastating Sarah felt physically ill. Marcus hadn't just failed to investigate Jessica's case, he'd actively buried it. He'd lost evidence. He'd protected a rapist. And a girl had died because the system, because he, had failed her. Sarah sat in the darkness of her apartment, her wedding 12 hours away, and understood with absolute clarity that she couldn't marry this man. She couldn't marry someone capable of such callous cruelty, such moral bankruptcy. At 7 a.m., she called her mother. "Mom, I need to cancel the wedding." Catherine's shock was palpable. "What? Sarah, what happened?" "I can't explain right now. But I need you to trust me. Call the vendors, call the venue, tell everyone it's off." "Sarah, honey, this is a huge decision. Are you sure? Did you and Marcus fight?" "I'm sure," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Please, Mom. I need you to do this for me." By 9 a.m., the cancellation calls were being made. Guests were notified. The venue was informed. The carefully constructed future Sarah had imagined disintegrated like sand in a tide. At 10 a.m., Sarah called Marcus. "We need to talk," she said. "In person. I'm at my apartment." "Sarah, what's going on?" "Your mother called and said. Just come. Now." He arrived 30 minutes later, still in casual clothes, his expression confused and concerned. "Sarah, talk to me. What happened?" She showed him her laptop, the case file still open. "I know what you did to Jessica Reeves. I know you buried her case. I know you lost the rape kit. I know you protected Blake Hoffman." The concern drained from Marcus's face, replaced by something calculating and cold. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. Instead, he closed the laptop carefully and sat down across from her. "You accessed confidential police files," he said quietly. "That's illegal. You let a rapist walk free and a girl died because of it. That girl was unstable. The case was weak. Blake Hoffman's family has resources, they would have destroyed her in court. I made a practical decision. Sarah's horror crystallized into something harder, clearer. You took money from his father. It was a donation to charity. 2 days before you closed the case. Marcus's jaw tightened. You don't understand how this works, Sarah. The real world isn't like your crisis center where everyone's a victim and everyone deserves saving. Sometimes you have to make choices based on what's achievable, what's practical. You're talking about justice like it's a negotiation. It is. That's exactly what it is. Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used in interrogations. Sarah, I love you. We're supposed to get married today. Don't throw away our future because of one complicated case. One complicated case where a girl died. She made that choice. Not me. The casual cruelty of the statement took Sarah's breath away. This was who he was, who he'd always been beneath the charm and the concern and the declarations of love. A man who saw people as variables to manage, problems to solve, obstacles to navigate. I can't marry you, Sarah said. I can't be with someone capable of this. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, the charm evaporating completely, revealing something raw and dangerous beneath. You're making a mistake. No. Marrying you would have been the mistake. I've given you 6 years, Sarah. 6 years of my life. You don't get to just walk away because you don't like how I do my job. Your job is to protect people, not betray them. Marcus stood abruptly, his hands clenching into fists. You think you're better than me? You're not. You're just naive. You work with victims and you think that makes you good, but all you do is enable weakness. I deal with reality. Get out of my apartment. We're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. Get out, or I'm calling 911. For a moment, Marcus looked at her with such cold fury that Sarah's survival instincts screamed. Then he turned and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. You're going to regret this, he said quietly. The door closed behind him, and Sarah collapsed onto her couch, her whole body shaking. She'd done the right thing. She knew she had. But the look in Marcus's eyes terrified her in a way she couldn't fully articulate. She called her best friend, Rachel, who arrived within 15 minutes and held her while she cried. You're safe now, Rachel kept saying. It's over. You're safe. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. That Marcus's threat had been more than just words. Sarah spent the next hour on the phone with her lawyer, explaining what she'd found, asking what to do. The lawyer was blunt. You accessed confidential files illegally. You could be prosecuted. But what Marcus did, if you can prove it, is far worse. We need to get this information to someone outside his department. Someone who can investigate without his interference. Sarah thought about Rodriguez, about the pity in his eyes when he'd warned her. She called him directly. Lieutenant Rodriguez, I need to talk to you about Marcus Whitfield. About Jessica Reeves's case. A long pause. Where are you? My apartment. Why? Stay there. I'm coming to you. And Sarah? Don't talk to Marcus. Don't answer if he calls. Do you understand? The urgency in his voice frightened her. Yes. I understand. Rodriguez arrived 40 minutes later with another detective Sarah didn't recognize. They sat in her living room, and Sarah showed them everything she'd found. The missing rape kit, the buried evidence, the donation timeline, Marcus's dismissive report. Rodriguez's face grew darker with each revelation. How long have you known about this? Since last night. I confronted Marcus this morning. He admitted it. He said it was a practical decision. The other detective, a woman named Chen, exchanged a look with Rodriguez. We need you to know something, Chen said carefully. Jessica Reeves isn't the first case where we've had concerns about Detective Whitfield's conduct. There have been 3 other sexual assault cases in the past 2 years where evidence went missing or investigations stalled under suspicious circumstances. Sarah felt the room tilt. 3 others. We've been trying to build an internal affairs case, but Marcus is careful. He knows how to cover his tracks. Your testimony about this morning's conversation, him admitting to burying evidence. That could be the break we need. Are there other women? Sarah's voice cracked. Other victims he betrayed? Rodriguez nodded grimly. We believe so. Young women, mostly college-aged, cases involving wealthy or connected suspects. The pattern is clear once you know to look for it. Sarah thought about all the times she'd watched Marcus leave for work, believed he was fighting for justice, trusted him completely. He'd been doing the opposite. Protecting predators, silencing victims, collecting whatever benefits came from his betrayals. He's been doing this our entire relationship, Sarah said, the realization settling like ice in her chest. I've been sleeping next to someone capable of this for 6 years and I never knew. He's exceptionally good at compartmentalization, Chen said. Sociopathic, probably. He shows people what they want to see. The word sociopathic echoed in Sarah's mind. She thought about Marcus's charm, his calculated kindness, the way he'd monitored and controlled her while making it seem like love. The evidence had been there all along, she'd just been trained by his manipulation not to see it. What happens now? Sarah asked. We need your statement on record, Rodriguez said. And we need you to be very careful. Marcus is dangerous, Sarah. Men like him don't handle rejection or exposure well. When their control is threatened, they escalate. The doorbell rang, making all of them jump. Chen moved to the window, looked out carefully. It's a delivery. Looks like flowers. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, asterisk, I'm sorry about this morning. Can we please talk? I love you. Asterisk. She showed the text to Rodriguez, whose expression hardened. He's trying to manipulate you back. Don't respond. Don't engage. We're going to put a patrol car outside your building, just as a precaution. You think he'd actually hurt me? I think when someone's entire life is about to implode, they become unpredictable. Better safe than sorry. They took Sarah's formal statement, documenting everything Marcus had said, everything she'd discovered. When they left, Rachel returned to stay with her, and Sarah watched through the window as a patrol car parked on the street below. Her phone kept buzzing, texts from Marcus, calls from his number that she didn't answer. The messages evolved from apologetic to confused to angry. Sarah, you're making this worse than it needs to be. Asterisk. Answer your phone. We can work this out. Asterisk. You can't just ignore me. We need to talk about this. Asterisk. I know you're scared but you're being irrational. Asterisk. Each message revealed more of the real Marcus, the one who couldn't tolerate loss of control, who saw her silence as defiance rather than self-protection. Rachel read them over Sarah's shoulder. He's unraveling, she said quietly. You need to stay away from him. But staying away became harder when, at 1 p.m., Sarah's mother called in tears. Marcus came to the house. He wanted to talk to your father. He said you'd had a breakdown, that you'd accessed confidential files illegally, that you were having a crisis and needed help. Sarah, what's going on? Sarah explained everything, not just about the cancelled wedding, but about Jessica, about the pattern of cases, about what Marcus really was. Her mother listened in horrified silence. Oh my God, Catherine whispered. We welcomed him into our family. We trusted him. So did I, Mom. Where is he now? I don't know. He left about 30 minutes ago. Sarah, your father told him you were at your apartment. Fear spiked through Sarah's chest. He knows where I am. The police are there, right? Rodriguez said he'd have someone watching. Sarah looked out the window. The patrol car was gone, probably on a call, or a shift change. The street below was empty. Sarah stood at her window, watching the empty street, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. For 6 years, she'd built her identity around being Marcus's partner, had adjusted her boundaries, rationalized his control, convinced herself that love meant compromise. She'd betrayed her own values, her own training, her own instincts. But Jessica Reeves's death had stripped away every illusion. There was no compromise with cruelty. No accommodation for betrayal. No love that justified silence in the face of injustice. She thought about the Stoic philosophers she'd studied in college, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. They taught that some things were within your control and some weren't, and wisdom meant knowing the difference. She couldn't control what Marcus had done. She couldn't undo Jessica's death or save the other victims from their trauma. But she could control her response. She could choose courage over fear. She could choose truth over comfort. Rachel was in the kitchen making tea, her phone to her ear, talking to Rodriguez about the missing patrol car. Sarah grabbed her laptop and began documenting everything she knew, not just about Jessica's case, but about Marcus's behavior over the years. The monitoring. The isolation from friends. The subtle ways he'd manipulated and controlled her. She thought about her clients. Women who'd come to her broken and afraid, who'd found the strength to leave violent partners, to testify in court, to rebuild their lives from ashes. She'd told them they were brave. She'd told them they deserved better. Now she had to believe the same things about herself. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus, *, I'm outside. Let me in. We can fix this. *. Sarah's heart hammered, but she didn't move to the window. She called Rodriguez instead. He's here, she said. He says he's outside. Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm sending units now. Sarah hung up and turned to Rachel. Go into the bedroom. Lock the door. I'm not leaving you alone with him. Rachel, please. The apartment door shuddered with a heavy impact. Marcus was kicking it, his voice muffled through the wood. Sarah. Open the door. I know you're in there. Rachel grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her toward the bedroom. But Sarah resisted. She'd spent 6 years being afraid of Marcus's anger, of triggering his control. She was done running. Call 911, Sarah told Rachel. Then she walked to the door, standing well back from it. Marcus, the police are on their way. You need to leave. You don't get to do this. His voice was ragged now, desperate. You don't get to destroy my life because you found something you don't like. You destroyed your own life. You betrayed everything you were supposed to stand for. I loved you. I gave you everything. You gave me lies. You gave me manipulation. That's not love. Another impact, harder this time. The doorframe cracked. Marcus was strong, athletic, the door wouldn't hold much longer. Sarah grabbed a kitchen knife, her hand steady despite her fear. She'd counseled enough domestic violence survivors to know the statistics, to know how often these situations ended in blood. But she also knew that predators relied on their victims' passivity, their learned helplessness. She wasn't helpless anymore. Marcus, I'm armed. If you break through that door, I will defend myself. A pause. Then, you wouldn't. Try me. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sarah heard Marcus's ragged breathing through the door, could picture his face, red with rage, cold with calculation, trying to decide his next move. This isn't over, Sarah, he said finally. You think you can ruin me and walk away? You think there won't be consequences? The sirens were close now, multiple units from the sound of it. Sarah heard Marcus's footsteps retreating, and heard the stairwell door slam. She sagged against the wall, the knife clattering from her shaking hands. Rachel emerged from the bedroom and wrapped her arms around Sarah. "It's okay. He's gone. You're okay." But Sarah knew Marcus wasn't gone, not really. Men like him didn't surrender. They regrouped. They planned. They waited for their moment. The police found Marcus's car in the parking garage 2 blocks from Sarah's apartment. He wasn't in it. Rodriguez put out an APB, contacted Marcus's family and friends, and issued a bolo to all units. Marcus Whitfield was armed, dangerous, and his entire life was imploding. Sarah stayed in her apartment under police protection while Rodriguez and Chen worked to build their case. But they needed more than her testimony. They needed the physical evidence, the witnesses, the paper trail that Marcus had so carefully obscured. "We found something," Chen said when she came by that evening. "In Marcus's locker at the precinct. A burner phone with communications to Blake Hoffman's father. Money transfers. It looks like he's been taking payments to bury cases for years." Sarah felt sick. How much money? Over $100,000, spread across various cases. He was careful, but not careful enough. What happens now? "We're getting warrants. Search warrant for his apartment, subpoenas for his financial records, everything." "But Sarah, you need to understand, when this breaks, when Marcus realizes we have the evidence, he's going to be cornered. And cornered predators are the most dangerous kind." "Where is he now?" "We don't know. His phone is off. He's not at his apartment or any known associates. He could be anywhere." The uncertainty was torture. Sarah tried to sleep but kept startling awake, imagining Marcus outside her door, in her building, waiting for his moment. The police presence helped, but she knew they couldn't stay forever. By the next afternoon, what should have been the day after her wedding, should have been her first day as Mrs. Whitfield, Sarah was exhausted and brittle. She'd barely eaten. She jumped at every sound. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in. Rachel had to leave for a few hours to handle her own responsibilities, and Sarah found herself alone with her thoughts. She kept returning to Jessica's suicide note, *, "I told the truth. It didn't matter. *. But it did matter. It had to matter. Sarah pulled out her laptop and began writing, everything she knew, everything she discovered, everything Marcus had done. If something happened to her, there would be a record. The truth would survive even if she didn't. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Sarah?" A woman's voice, young, shaking. "My name is Alexis Porter. I'm one of the other cases. The detective, Chen, called me and told me what you found, about Marcus, about what he did to all of us." Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you. You stopped your wedding. You exposed him. You believed us when no one else did." Alexis was crying now. "Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to do what I couldn't." They talked for an hour. Alexis shared her story, another wealthy suspect, another buried investigation, another betrayal by someone sworn to protect. By the end, both women were in tears, connected by their shared trauma and their shared determination that this would end differently than it had for Jessica. "We're going to make sure he pays for this," Sarah said. "All of us together." After they hung up, Sarah felt lighter despite everything, like she'd found her purpose in the wreckage. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman Marcus had betrayed, every victim he'd silenced. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, * parking garage. Level 3. "If you want this to end, come alone. *. Sarah's blood went cold. She knew she should call Rodriguez, should stay in her apartment, should do everything she'd been told. But she also knew Marcus would keep escalating, keep threatening, keep circling until someone got hurt. She grabbed her keys and her phone, texted Rachel her location just in case, and headed for the parking garage. The parking garage was dim and cold, the fluorescent lights casting sickly yellow pools across oil-stained concrete. Sarah's footsteps echoed as she climbed the stairs to level 3, every muscle in her body tensed for danger. Marcus stood beside a concrete pillar, still wearing the clothes from yesterday, looking haggard and wild-eyed. His service weapon was visible in his shoulder holster. When he saw Sarah, something like relief crossed his face. "You came," he said. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want you to understand." He took a step closer and Sarah stepped back, maintaining distance. "Everything I did for us. For our future. Do you know how much debt I was in from student loans? How hard it is to live on a cop's salary in this city. I was trying to build a life where we could be comfortable, where I could take care of you. By taking bribes to protect rapists. By being practical." His voice echoed off concrete. "Those girls, they were going to get destroyed in court anyway. Rich families, expensive lawyers, character assassination. I saved them from that trauma while securing our financial future. It was a win-win." Sarah stared at him, horrified by the genuine conviction in his voice. He actually believed his own rationalizations. "Jessica Reeves killed herself because you betrayed her. Jessica Reeves was unstable. She would have self-destructed eventually. That's not my fault. You made yourself judge and jury over who deserved justice. Someone has to." Marcus's composure was cracking now, his voice rising. "You think the system works? You think justice is real? It's all politics and money and who has the best lawyer. I was just working within reality instead of pretending it's fair. So you became exactly what you were supposed to fight against. I became what I needed to be to survive." The raw desperation in his voice frightened Sarah more than the anger. This was Marcus at his core, not charming or controlled, but desperate and cornered and willing to do anything to maintain his illusion of power. "The police know everything," Sarah said carefully. "They have your burner phone. They have the financial records. It's over, Marcus. The best thing you can do is turn yourself in." "Turn myself in?" He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "So I can go to prison? Spend the rest of my life locked up with criminals I helped convict? They'll kill me in there, Sarah. You know they will. Then run. Leave the country. But let this end without anyone else getting hurt. I can't run. They've already frozen my accounts, flagged my passport. I'm trapped." He pulled his weapon, not pointing it at her but holding it loosely at his side. "You did this. You trapped me." Sarah's heart hammered but she kept her voice steady. "I exposed the truth. You trapped yourself with your choices. My choices were necessary. You're too naive to understand that." He was pacing now, agitated, the gun swinging with his movements. "I love you, Sarah. I've always loved you. We could have had an amazing life together if you just trusted me, just let me handle things my way. Your way involves betraying everything I believe in. Your beliefs are childish fantasies. Justice, fairness, accountability, they're fairy tales for people who can't handle reality. If that's what you really think, then you never knew me at all. And I never knew you." Something in Marcus broke at those words. Sarah saw it happen. The final thread of his composure snapping, leaving only rage and desperation. He raised the gun, pointing it directly at her chest. "Don't do this," Sarah said, forcing calm into her voice despite her terror. "Marcus, please. This doesn't have to end like this." "You're right," he said quietly. "It doesn't have to end with me in prison, destroyed, humiliated. It can end with you understanding what you've done. What you've taken from me. I didn't take anything. I just stopped letting you take from me. You took my future. Our future. There was no future, Marcus. It was built on lies. He fired. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Sarah felt the impact like a sledgehammer to her chest, felt her legs give way, felt the cold concrete rushing up to meet her. She slid down the pillar, leaving a smear of blood on gray stone, her phone clattering across the floor. Marcus stood frozen, staring at what he'd done, the gun still in his hand. Sarah could see him processing it, the irreversibility, the finality, the fact that he'd just crossed a line he could never uncross. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I couldn't." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the shot, called 911. Marcus looked toward the sound, then back at Sarah crumpled on the ground, then at the gun in his hand. Sarah tried to speak, to tell him it was over, but her lungs wouldn't work. Blood bloomed across her white blouse, warm and spreading. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers slippery with blood, managed to unlock it, saw the message she'd started to her mother still in drafts, *, Mom, I need help. He knows. *. She hit send with the last of her strength. Marcus was gone when the police arrived 30 seconds later, fled into the labyrinth of the parking garage, leaving Sarah bleeding out on level 3 while the sirens screamed closer. Sarah Mitchell survived. The bullet had missed her heart by 2 inches, collapsing her lung and fracturing 2 ribs but avoiding major arteries. The paramedics who reached her within 3 minutes credited her survival to luck and her own stubborn refusal to die. She spent 4 days in ICU, drifting in and out of consciousness, her family camped in the waiting room while police stood guard outside her door. When she finally woke fully, Rodriguez was sitting beside her bed. "We got him," he said quietly. "Marcus. He tried to make it to the state line but we had roadblocks up within an hour. He's in custody." Sarah's voice came out as a rasp. "The others? The victims? Coming forward. Alexis, 2 others. Your courage gave them courage." Rodriguez paused. "Internal affairs is tearing apart his entire career. We found evidence of misconduct going back to his first year on the force. He won't see freedom again." The relief Sarah felt was complicated. Satisfaction mixed with grief for who she thought Marcus was, anger at how thoroughly he'd deceived her, and a strange, hollow sadness for the future that had died in that parking garage. Her parents were devastated and supportive. Her friends rallied around her. The crisis center where she worked sent flowers and cards and promises that her job would be waiting when she was ready to return. But the hardest visitor was Jessica Reeves's mother, who came to Sarah's hospital room 3 days after the shooting, her face ravaged by grief. "I needed to thank you," she said. "For believing in my daughter. For being brave enough to expose what was done to her." They cried together, 2 women connected by trauma and loss and the terrible price of truth. The investigation into Marcus Whitfield became national news. Other cases began emerging. Not just sexual assaults, but evidence tampering, false confessions, civil rights violations stretching back years. The Charleston Police Department faced a reckoning about its internal culture, its oversight, its willingness to look the other way when one of their own became corrupt. Marcus himself awaited trial on charges including attempted murder, bribery, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. His attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal. Rodriguez told Sarah the prosecution wasn't interested, they wanted the trial, wanted the public exposure, wanted every detail of Marcus's corruption laid bare. Sarah returned to her apartment 6 weeks after the shooting, still in pain, still processing trauma, but determined to reclaim her life. She'd survived Marcus's attempt to silence her. She'd survived his final, desperate assertion of control. Now she had to learn to live with the aftermath. 3 months after the shooting, Sarah Mitchell sat in the courtroom during Marcus Whitfield's trial, watching him testify in his own defense. He was thinner, grayer, the charming mask completely gone to reveal the desperate, hollow man beneath. He claimed he'd acted out of love. Claimed he'd been protecting Sarah from making a terrible mistake. Claimed the gun had discharged accidentally in his emotional state. Sarah listened to his lies and felt nothing but pity. Marcus had spent his entire life trying to control everything, people, circumstances, reality itself. And in the end, his compulsive need for control had destroyed him more thoroughly than any external force could have. The Stoics taught that suffering came from attachment to things beyond your control. Marcus had been attached to everything: his reputation, his power, his relationship, his carefully constructed image. When those things had been threatened, he'd imploded rather than accept loss. Sarah had learned a different lesson. She'd learned that you could lose everything, your future, your safety, nearly your life, and still survive. That survival wasn't about control, but about resilience. About choosing courage when every instinct screamed for you to hide. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Marcus showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but Sarah saw his hands trembling as the bailiff led him away. Afterward, on the courthouse steps, reporters crowded around her asking for comments. Sarah kept her statement brief. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. Marcus Whitfield betrayed his oath, betrayed the women who trusted him to seek justice for them, and betrayed the fundamental principles of the system he was sworn to uphold. Today, that system held him accountable. I hope this brings some measure of peace to his victims and their families. She didn't mention Jessica Reeves by name. The family had requested privacy, but she thought about her constantly. That bright, hopeful girl who'd believed truth mattered, who'd killed herself when she learned it didn't. Jessica had been wrong. Truth did matter. It just sometimes took longer than it should, cost more than it should, and required more courage than seemed humanly possible. Sarah returned to work at the crisis center, where she counseled other women navigating the aftermath of betrayal and violence. She spoke at training sessions for police departments about the importance of believing victims, about the devastating impact of misconduct and corruption. She never married. She dated occasionally but approached relationships with a wariness born of hard experience. Trust, she'd learned, wasn't given freely, it was earned through consistency, honesty, and time. Some nights, she still woke from nightmares about the parking garage, the echo of the gunshot, the feeling of her body failing, the cold certainty that she was going to die. But those nights grew less frequent over time, replaced by dreams of Jessica, of Alexis, of all the women who'd found their voices because Sarah had found hers first. A year after the trial, Sarah received a letter from Marcus, smuggled out from prison despite a no-contact order. She debated throwing it away unread, but curiosity won. The letter was rambling, self-pitying, still trying to rewrite history. Marcus claimed he'd been a victim of circumstances, of systemic pressures, of Sarah's unrealistic expectations. He claimed he still loved her, that he'd always loved her, that she'd understand someday what he'd been trying to build for them. Sarah burned the letter in her kitchen sink, watching the paper curl and blacken, watching Marcus's final attempt at manipulation turn to ash. She understood perfectly what he'd been building, a monument to his ego, constructed on the broken backs of women he betrayed. She was glad she'd demolished it before becoming another casualty in its foundation. Sarah Mitchell's story asks uncomfortable questions. How many people do we trust without truly knowing them? How many red flags do we rationalize because love demands we see the best in people? How many times do we choose comfort over truth, silence over justice? And perhaps most importantly, when we finally see someone's true nature, do we have the courage to act on that knowledge, even when the cost is everything we've built together? Marcus Whitfield is serving 25 years to life in a maximum security prison. Sarah Mitchell continues her work advocating for assault survivors, speaking truth to power, and reminding us all that justice delayed is not justice denied, sometimes it's justice hard won. What would you have done in Sarah's position? Would you have investigated, or would you have chosen to believe? When you discovered the truth, would you have had the courage to cancel your wedding, knowing it might cost you your life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Like this story if it moved you. Subscribe for more true stories that explore the darkness and light of the human experience, because sometimes the most important stories are the ones that make us question everything we thought we knew about love, trust, and justice. Remember, the truth will always find its way to the surface. The only question is whether we have the courage to face it when it does.